Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Stocks All Day with Dr. O'Day. If you've been following along, I've told you how I use the MACD as a kind of major indicator for me that maybe I should buy into a stock. Then I use the 10-day relative strength indicator as a way to kind of, if that fails and I stop out, do I buy back into the stock? I use moving averages to kind of confirm trend reversals and things like that, and kind of confirm trends going upward. And now I'm going to talk about kind of one last piece of the puzzle, which is using support and resistance to kind of also gauge, is the stock done with its downtrend? Because we typically see stocks reversing at similar intervals. So if it bounced off of a particular price point at one point in history, they oftentimes bounce off of a similar point in the future. And so it's, for me, if it's right in between, if it hasn't even gotten close to any support levels, I'm probably not going to buy that even if the MACD is signaling for me. And additionally, if it's signaling very close to a line of resistance, I'm also not going to want to buy into that thing. And so this is kind of one last piece of the puzzle to kind of decide, is it realistic based on these kind of support and resistance levels that stock is actually going to go up. So if you find this video interesting, you find it helpful, please support the channel by hitting like and subscribe. Please also note that this is not investment advice. This is just how I use the these various indicators and how I use support and resistance to kind of gauge, is it realistic that the price is going to go up? As always, investing is risky, and do so at your own risk, using your own strategy. So these green and red lines are what are called support and resistance lines. Now you can draw these in yourself, and what you're looking for is periods where the price tends to have some action. So right here, I mean, this could have been I would draw this in as a support line, right where my cursor is. Because what we see is that right here, the price reversed off of that. Right here, the price reversed off of that. Right here, the price reversed off of that. And it's very interesting that over time, this happens, right? And a lot of people think of stocks as being completely random, but they're not that random. They tend to reverse around similar time points. And then once they break through that, then the trend is going to continue downward or upward. And so what we see here is I actually have built into my Pine editing script, I actually have it built in these support and resistance lines automatically. And I actually got that from another trader, so I'm going to type in support and resistance. Let's just type in support. And I believe that this is the one that I use, so I want to give a quick shout out because this is remarkable. Lonesome the Blue has shared this Pine editing strategy with everyone, and it just kind of automatically codes in these support and resistance lines. And so you can just search for that. It's freely available for you to use, and you can add that in, and it saves you a lot of time. Now again, I also add in some of my own lines. I would probably add in a line right here, kind of that horizontal line acting in as a level of support there. And so, if you haven't already, go ahead and watch my video on how I use the MACD, how I use the RSI indicator, how I use moving averages, and I'll link them as well. But I also, once, I decide to potentially buy a stock, I also think about these support and resistance levels. A lot of people actually use support and resistance to just enter and exit trades without anything else. And they are fantastic. But for me, it's more about, is the MACD telling me to buy, and then is the support and resistance kind of confirming that. So right here, we have a MACD crossover below zero, and that's a potential buy signal. And it also just crossed over the 50-day EMA and the 50-day moving average. This is potentially a good buy period for me, to kind of buy on one of these 2 days here. Now, now we need to decide, is there enough upward movement before we hit some strong resistance for me to be comfortable purchasing that stock? So if we were in this day, if we were on March 29th, I could potentially do a long buy. Let's say that it's early on March 29th. I see that we crossed the 50-day EMA, and I see that, kind of that day also we had that, we're trending toward a MACD crossover. And actually, I tend to be someone that when it trends toward a MACD crossover, what I do is I actually look at the 4-hour MACD as well. And if it's trending toward it and then the 4 hour is already crossed, then I go ahead and buy as well. And so what I do is I start my long. I might have, on this particular day, on, March 29th, I might have entered a long trade here. And now I got to decide, where do I set my stop loss? Because we got to make sure that we minimize our risk as much as we can. Now, what a lot of people do with their stop loss is they look at kind of the most recent, the most recent swing lows. And so again, we kind of saw that a lot of, the price dropped down to about 101.33 is what we're seeing here. So I at least want to set my stop loss below all of those. Well, I also see the 200-day exponential moving average, which is that thick black line there, and that oftentimes functions as a very strong level of support where if it does break through this green line again, it probably will rebound off of that thick black line, if not the green line. And so you as a trader are going to have to decide, do you want to take a little bit less risk and be just below these ones? Do you want to take a little bit more risk and be below the 200-day exponential moving average? Do you want to take even more risk and be below this green line of support here? And you're going to have to figure out what works for you. For me, if I were looking at this, I would probably at least put my stop loss below the 200-day EMA. But I always enter trades with a 1.5 reward to risk ratio. And right now we're just sitting at a 0.9. So what I would do is I would actually extend this up until that's equal to 1.5. Or at least close to 1.5. So now what I'm saying is, okay, in this trade, I'm going to risk 7.19%, but then if it's a winner, I'm going to gain 10.78%. But now I have to kind of critically evaluate this particular stock before I buy into it. Is it realistic that we're going to get up to this point? No, it's not realistic. And so I probably wouldn't buy this particular stock. Whereas if we come over here, let's look at one that I recently purchased. We saw that there was a MACD crossover here. Then soon after, the price kind of, so actually right here was where I bought in. And I know that's off to the side here. That's because I always set them off to the side on the long buys. But we saw a MACD crossover below zero. We saw a pretty strong trend across both the 50-day EMA and the 50-day moving average. So I purchased this particular stock right here. And I'm still waiting on this stock, but I took a pretty wide stop loss here. So I saw that the price had recently swung all the way down to here. That's a 9.6 kind of risk, which means that I've got a 14.4 potential profit margin here to ensure that 1.5 reward to risk. And you might be saying, is that realistic? That's what I was asking myself, because this is a wide swing. Well, I do think that that's realistic. Now, I'm going to have to continue to evaluate this, and it might not ever get above there. But if we look at what's been happening to this price, we can kind of map out a trend across there by connecting all of the recent highs, all of those recent swing highs, and we see that if we continue this line, it does seem realistic that at some point the price might get up to that 14.4. So now what I'm going to do is to kind of confirm this, again, I come over here and I type in A for Agilient Technologies, and I kind of look at where analysts are pricing this stock. And so the current is 127.69. The average analyst price target is 139.50. low is 126, high is 150. So now we want to see, is it realistic that this stock, and this is, the yearly analyst price targets, but I mean this thing's on a pretty strong uptrend right now. So we just got to see, is this realistic? 141, they're saying that on average in the next year it's going to be around 139. It might not be super realistic to get all the way up there, but oftentimes I'm going to take this trade more often than not because I could, potentially tighten up this stop loss, but I want to leave it there. But if things are really looking bad, a lot of times I actually exit trades before I actually fully stop out, and that does allow me to maintain that 1.5 risk to reward. So at this point, that stock has gone up, and I was pretty confident that this was going to continue to go up. And what we're seeing here is I've just got to continue to evaluate this stock. It might not ever get quite up to that 14.4, but I do think that this one is going to continue its uptrend, at least in the short term. So that is how I use kind of these levels of support and resistance to kind of get a gauge of exactly what's going to happen to this stock. Now, I might want to add in a level of resistance right here and just kind of let myself know that, that was the most recent swing high. We might have some issues getting above that. So as we get close to that, I'm going to need to watch what's happening to the price. Well, I hope you learned something about how I use support and resistance lines. Again, a lot of people are using these to actually just a lot of people use only support and resistance as a way to kind of gauge, once we break through some line of resistance, a lot of people buy right then and they set their stop loss just below that resistance to actually, because now it's functioning as a line of support. And if that trend continues upward, they can make some good money. Again, I just use this as a way to gauge, is it realistic that the price is going to continue to go up? If it is, I go ahead and buy. If it's not, I go ahead and I stay out. So with that, if you have any questions, please let me know. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe if you learned something new or found this interesting, and have a great rest of your day.